Welcome to Aligned and Whole. I'm Efren Lyle, your host here on Awakening Airwaves, and our topic today is going to be journaling as a tool for spiritual growth. I'm a lifelong journaler, started when I was very young, like elementary age, and back then we called it a diary. And I loved journaling in my little book. And it brought me a lot of peace and a lot of enjoyment to write about my different activities, things I was doing with my friends. And I was an only girl in a family of boys, and I had my own room as a result of that. And so I had a lot of downtime, alone time, and it became one of my favorite pastimes since I didn't have a sister to always share things with, even though I had a lot of girlfriends. And so over time, I found that I just really enjoyed journaling. Even as I got older, it was one of my favorite pastimes. And so I eventually, many years later, I developed a class on journaling, which allowed me to do some research into different types of journaling and the benefits of journaling. And it was so powerful and affirming to me that I want to share a lot of what I've learned over the years with you today. So I call this class Journaling as a Tool for Spiritual Growth because what it became for me is a way for me to chronicle the experiences of different types that I was having as a result of specifically my spiritual journey, which is our life journey because we are truly spiritual beings. So in journaling, and people can call it a diary if you want, but journaling is kind of like a broader term that I like because it's not only women that journal, girls that journal, many men are avid journalers as well. And so what a journal does for you, it's a place where you can keep a record, a chronicle, if you will, of your thoughts on a daily, weekly, monthly, or periodic basis, because there are no rules that say that you have to journal every single day. It's whatever you need, whatever works for you. And so this record is something that is very, very personal. And there are different types of journals. There are those that are just a chronicle of whatever you want to write. But sometimes people keep a specific journal for their dreams if they are a person who dreams a lot. Sometimes people keep a journal of projects that they're working on or business they're developing. Maybe it's for an aspect of life. There are a lot of journals out there that you can buy that or have prompts like, for someone who is getting ready to get married, or maybe you're starting college, is when you are pregnant, maybe you're expecting your first child. There's so many different journals. There are even journals for grandparents. I know I had one of those when I became a grandparent for the first time. And so there are many, many different things, but you can also just have a blank book, which is my favorite, is just blank pages that I can pour my heart into. And so the spiritual part of it is, for me, became so crucial, is that because I was raised in one spiritual practice, and then I began to explore other spiritual practices. And it was a time where I had a lot of things going on in my mind and heart, trying to figure out life for myself as a young adult. And so most of my journaling became about those things that were just closest to my heart. So whether it was relationships of different kinds or ideas about life from different perspectives, and then it just became everything to me. And so, what is spiritual growth? Spiritual growth is talking about your personal theology, what you believe about your relationship to the Creator, to divine source, to the universe, whatever you call that aspect of our lives. And so, it's a way of expanding your consciousness to understand who you are. What are you doing here? What is your place here? What is this thing we call life all about? And so that's why I call this class Journaling as a Tool for Spiritual Growth, to help you be able to have a place to document that journey that we all take. And usually it's a lifelong journey that even though we may find a specific spiritual path that we're committed to, we always have the opportunity, and many of us take the opportunity to look at different spiritual practices because there's things that we can glean from all of them because they're all valid. And so, and then growth is about expansion, about our evolution. So, journaling as a tool for spiritual growth is why what we're talking about today. So, our personal theology is about discovering yourself to be a divine being. And whatever that means to you, this course is not about that, but that's what the journal will allow you to do. Wherever you are in your walk in life and whatever your beliefs are, and that they morph and change and evolve, this is a place where you can review those things, discuss those things. Sometimes it's so personal that you don't really want to talk to another person. You can explore that in your private thoughts in your journal. So when we think about privacy, it's very important concern. And so some of the solutions to privacy is decide what is appropriate and what you feel about privacy based on your circumstances. So when in my early years of a journal, living at home, I could find places to stick my journal where, nobody can really just walk in the room and it's laying there on my bed, inviting them to come and read. And then I left home and I was living in dorm for several years. So it was a little bit more challenging, but you find ways to keep some of the things private. And then at the point where I was married, it was about having trust that you have your individual privacy when you're living in a situation with a mate, a spouse, and I still didn't leave it out and around the house. And my spouse knew that I was an avid journaler, but we had a vow of trust in our marriage that I don't believe was ever violated. And so you have to think about your circumstances, who you're living with, and even if you're living alone, you don't want to leave your journal out so that if somebody just happened to come by, you're not stressed about, oh my gosh, I got to grab my journal, that kind of thing. So always have a nice idea of what your journaling is about. And with regard to the privacy, I have a disclaimer in the front of every one of my journals. I didn't start off that way, but that's what it developed into. And so on that first page after you open the book, I have a disclaimer where I put my name and I put the year that I started the journal, and then I have a disclaimer. And they're just different in every one. It depends on where my head is at the time that I'm starting a new journal. So some of them will say, these are my private thoughts and feelings. Please respect me and yourself by not reading this journal. Some of them will say, read at your own risk. All of them have a statement at the bottom that I developed many years ago that says, if you read this journal and you find something about yourself or that's disturbing to you for whatever reason, don't come to me. You shouldn't have been reading my book in the first place. So, it's up to you what you write. I eventually got to the place where even though I always put my journals away, they're not just left out anywhere. I don't care if anybody reads it because I claim this as mine and I have a right to it. I have a right to think and feel and say in my journal whatever I want because it's for me. It's about me. So I claim that for myself. It took me many years to get to that place, but once I got there, I'm solid in it. So that's a journey that you will take on your own, but know that you have the right to claim that journal for yourself. And speaking of that, I do handwritten journals, and that works for me. But many people, especially nowadays that we have so much technology, there are many websites and apps and things that you can get for your computer or for your phone where you can write your heart out about your journal, and you can have it password protected and all those kinds of things. And so it's very convenient, and does make things more private to you. And I've tried those in the past when it first became available, and it just doesn't work for me. I like having pen to paper. I love that connection that I have with actual writing. And there's research that says that kinesthetic experience that we have with our body and the paper, the pen, and our brain, it does make a difference in many ways. And I'm sure that a lot of people have that same type of experience with typing. I was never a good typist. And so pen and paper works best for me. That's something that is very personal to each individual. In addition, with your privacy issues in your journals, you can be a journal that you will write what you think and feel and need to say for yourself. And then you can rip those pages out and you can tear them up, you can flush them down the toilet, you can burn them, because the point is that you want to express and get things out of your system and download thoughts and feelings instead of carrying them around. And especially if you don't have anyone that you can talk to about certain things, but sometimes it really helps to do that. So keep that in mind as well with your journaling. So finding a secure place is individual based on your circumstances of your living and the space that you have. It also means that you will have to keep track of your journals over years. And I keep my journals. I have never really ripped few pages out over the years. There are times when I have done that. But for the most part, whatever I write, it stays there. And I keep my journals in a private space in my home. And they're secured and secluded. Nobody's just going to walk in and see them. So again, for each individual, you'll figure that out for yourself. So with the understanding that your journaling is something that is private to you, use your own imagination about how you want to manage those things. One of the things I love about my journals that I learned over the years is that in the first page is my disclaimer. The second page I leave blank. At least sometimes I leave a couple of pages, depending on the size of the journal, is because I devised a system where I make a table of content for myself. And you're like, what? In a journal? Yes, because there will be times in your life that certain things come about for you that you want to be able to know how to refer to if that's the kind of journaling you're going to do. And so I discovered that there were times when I wanted to go back and revisit something, but I didn't know how to find it. So I would make a table, started making a table of contents, and I left some blanks in the place. So in my journaling, and what I recommend is that every entry you write the month, the day, and the year, and the time, depending on what the journal entry is about. And you can also list in your journal if indeed you were at home when this situation was taking place, or if you were traveling or wherever you might be. And I'm going to come back to the travel thing in just a second. And so that way, when you do that, some major event in your life, maybe you graduated or you got married or you had your first child or some major promotion you had or you started your business, you will be able to go back in your journals if you do keep them, and you will be able to find those entries easily to revisit them. And we're going to talk a lot about that as we move forward. So with regards to traveling with your journal, be very mindful when you're traveling, because there come times when you travel that you will not have complete possession and privacy with your journal when you're on the road in any way, shape, or form. So what I recommend and what I learned to do is I'll carry a small notebook and I keep it in my purse. And while I'm away traveling, I will journal in there. And then those pages, I can either just tape them in my regular journal in the order of chronological order of the happenings, or I just keep that and I transfer that information. I can make a copy of it and stick it in the book. One of the reasons for that is that you don't want to lose that information, because that's a chronicle of you, your life, your thoughts, your feelings, your ideas, and your experiences. So I do that. There was a time when I was teaching journaling on a regular basis, and and I stressed the idea of not traveling with your main journal if you were somebody who was going to be keeping your journals, and ran into a lady who was telling me she was so upset because she went on a family trip and she took her journal and she lost it. She was devastated because she had written so much of her life in this journal. It was a pretty thick one. And so what she was learning was that why you wouldn't want to travel with your main journal. Come to find out that one of her family members had actually taken the journal. She found this out sometime later. So those are two good reasons that you don't want to travel with that journal. Now that we have so much technology, if you're someone who likes to handwrite in your journals, but when you're traveling, you can travel with your phone or your computer, and you can journal when you're traveling on those devices, because then you can have them password protected, save it to the cloud and things of that nature. But it's really important to consider those things depending on what type of journaling you're doing. With your dream journal, it could be the same thing. It depends on how your dreams are. There could be a lot of personal things that come up in your dreams, but you definitely want to have a record of those things and then figure out how you're going to put them in the chronological order in your journals. I keep my journals. I have journals going back many, many years, and I love to go back and reflect them, and it's a very important part of my process of why I journal and how. So your journal being a vehicle for your own life practice, for your own transformation, can have some really important details for you to chronicle, because it'll allow you to be able to see the patterns in your life, the things that you go through, the themes of things that you deal with in your life. If you go back and you look and you realize, you know what? I'm always feeling like this around this time of year, or I have the same repeating dream every time of this month during the moon or whatever may be happening, or every time I dream this happens, and so those are some really important connections to make for yourself. And so that's even more reason why you want to date every entry. The other thing I do, since I stopped keeping a separate dream journal from my regular journal, is that I will put the month, day, and time, and I'll put dream there. So if I'm going back to trace my dream, I don't have to read through all the entries. I have a notation that it was a dream. If I'm traveling and I make an entry, like when I return or stick in there, I'll put trip to, and I'll know which trip that was, that I can make those entries for. So an important thing about journaling is that you are talking to your own spirit. So you are the sender of information and the receiver of information, and providing your own feedback during your journaling process. So it's like a way of having an internal coaching system going on with yourself. And it's so important, especially nowadays, because we're moving so fast and everything is just at the speed of light almost. And everything's happening so fast because we have mass media and we're hearing about everything right as it's happening and all that. And so it's important to take the time when you're journaling to allow yourself to slow down and pay attention to your life and what's happening, how you feel, how you're processing information, what you're thinking, and your emotional state at different times. And that's one of the things I love the most about journaling, is because I get to slow down and go within and connect with myself. And so reflective questioning is really important for your journaling. So whether you keep your journals or not, each entry, I ask myself, why am I writing about this? I want to understand, am I just, blowing off steam, which is valid? Or is this something that I'm consciously aware that is important, that's happening in my life? Or am I just writing for the sake of writing? All of that is valid. But because it's coming from you, it's important for you to look at it and pay attention. Why am I writing about this? And what does it mean to me? Because I have found over years that as I'm writing, sometimes the importance of something will come to me that I had not realized already about what I'm describing. So, in that, you find that in your journals, you'll write many times about things. And when you go back to do your reflection, you will forgotten all about that experience. And sometimes it's very important, some things that we forget about. Sometimes we forget because it was traumatizing and we let it go. And sometimes we forget because we just don't want to deal with it at the moment. But everything that happens to us is significant. Everything that happens to us is important. And we have an opportunity to reflect, to get to know ourselves better and know how we are walking through our lives. So, reflective questioning. So, the first one is about asking yourself why you're writing about this thing. And then you can look back and allow yourself to deal with it in processes on a cursory level, or you can go real deep. It depends on what it is. Now, I want to stop here and say that journaling does not replace the need that we have to talk to other people. Journaling does not replace the need for therapy or counseling at any time. I am definitely one that I will sign myself up for some counseling sessions when I feel the need to talk to a neutral person to help me get some perspective in life. So my journaling just helps me from day to day to have a handle on myself. But it's also important to know when you need some professional help. So just like you know when you need to go to the doctor, know when you need to go to the mind doctor, which is your psychologist. So you'll find that there will be plenty of times when some of your entries don't necessarily need a revisit, but sometimes you're not going to know that for some time that that's not something you need to revisit. So some of our reflections will be very joyous to us, like, oh my gosh, I remember that. I was so down. I thought I would never make it through that experience, but I did. Look at me now, what I learned. And some of them will be a little disturbing because, like, wow, I'm still dealing with that. But it's a chance for you to take a handle of and say, you know what, I really need to tackle that thing. Maybe I'll make that a priority. So you can do with that as you will. Reflection helps you recognize and interpret the signs and symbols in your life too, because you'll find that if you're a dreamer, sometimes you have repetitive dreams, right? Sometimes you have repetitive experiences. You wonder, like, why do I keep experiencing the same thing over and over again? And that's important to check yourself on that. What is it that I'm not learning? Because the experience keeps coming back because there's more for you to pay attention to and more for you to learn. And so you can ask yourself, in your reflective questionings, that what was I feeling at the time? You know, was I conscious of those feelings at the time that thing was happening? Did I have any preconceived ideas about a person or a situation that was happening in my life? And did I have any insights about myself or the situation that'll be helpful for me in the future? So those are really, really good questions, and I'm sure you can add more for yourself. So, selecting your journal, if you're going to do a written journal, is very important. So you want to choose your journal carefully. Now, I have all different types of journals. I have spiral notebooks and composition books, and then I have fancy ones with leather and gilded pages and all that kind of thing. So it depends on who you are, how important the book is that you're writing in. And so I pick mine based on my mood at the time that I go to buy a new one. And so there are so many different types of journals, and I don't spend a lot of money on my journals. Sometimes I might want to treat myself, but I also, because over the years, people know how much I love journaling. People would give me gifts and they'll buy me these beautiful journals that I probably would have never bought for myself. So it's important for you to pay attention because you want it to be a pleasurable experience if you're going to be handwriting your journals. And also, the writing utensil is very important. I love a good pen. So make sure that you treat yourself to a nice journal, something that fits your mood at the time, but even more importantly, pick a nice pen that feels good in your hand, that is comfortable to write with. And so that the whole experience comes together for you as something enjoyable to do. Also, have a nice place. I have my favorite place to journal is sitting in my bed. because I usually journal when I wake up in the morning. I dream almost every night. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to capture my dream, and then I'll go on about whatever else I need to write about. And then at night, the last thing I do is I will download whatever is happening in the day. Now, there's some days that so much is happening that I journal when I get home or as soon as I have a chance in the evening. I don't always wait until it's time to close out my day. And so there'll be different times of day. But I also love to sit outdoors and journal. And so it just depends on who you are and where your favorite places to journal might be. But you want to make sure it's a nice experience. Maybe you like to journal with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or a glass of wine. Maybe you like to put on music. It depends, and sometimes that may be different at different times in your life that you'll have those things. One of my best things to do is I will either journal right after or right before I do a meditation, depending on how deep I want to go or what how heavy the thing that I'm going to be journaling about is for me, or how mystical it is. Sometimes I'll set myself up to do a meditation or some breath work before. So, rules for journaling, there are only a few. First and foremost is this whatever your privacy issues are going to be and what you want to do about that. But when you decide to be a journaler, don't force yourself to journal if you're not feeling it. Journal when you feel like that's something that is going to help and support you in your life, or that it's going to be enjoyable to you. So never, never force. I remember one of the first times I taught a journaling class, there was a lady that attended the class, and she said that she came to the class because she thought she should be doing journaling differently, that she should journal every day and she had to do it a certain way and everything. And I've never been like that. It's like, it's whatever it is to you. And so at the end of the class, she said that she was glad she came to the class because she learned that she didn't have to journal, and that she recognized that her journaling mostly happened when she was upset about something, especially if she was angry. And she realized that maybe if she journaled more often, she and dealt with her feelings, she wouldn't get as angry as she did sometimes. So that was a real eye opener for me in terms of the importance of knowing why you're journaling, and when you do it, understand how it's helping you. So it was a great eye opener for me. So when you begin your journaling, you don't want to go into your journaling thinking that, oh, I'm not a good writer, or I have to be, it's never good at grammar. No, none of that. Nobody's going to have a red pen that's going to collect your journal and take a look at it. So you start off by letting go of all that stuff. And even if you were an excellent writer, this is not what this is about, unless you are intending to this to be your memoir, which is a whole different purpose. Okay, so you're going to write quickly. When I say quickly, I mean you're just going to start writing. You don't think about it, you don't censor yourself, you're not editing yourself, you're not erasing, none of that. You just let it flow. And then you can stop and contemplate, wow, that was deep. Or what about this? And then you just go on and ask your reflective questions and write. Don't erase things and don't edit. The indication from yourself that you might want to edit something out or censor yourself in some way, that's a red flag for you. That thing is something you want to consider. Why do I feel I need to edit that? Why do I just feel like I want to erase that? Go into it. Then you can have the choice of ripping that page out if it's something too personal, and exploring that feeling, and then rip it out. You can tear it up, you can throw it away, you can put it in the trash, you can flush it down the toilet, or you can burn it. But take the opportunity to ask yourself, why am I censoring myself? Because those can be some of the most important things for you to explore. You also want to structure your book in a way, as I said earlier, that we said month, day, and year, and sometimes the time or the place, but also you want to indicate if you're journaling about a specific thing. Maybe you journal a lot about your work, so you can write month, day, and time, and then put in there some indication of work related. Or you can put in this was about a dream, or this is to do with my kids, so that you don't have to have separate journals for separate things. And you can go back, and if you're looking for a specific entry, so maybe you had a major dream or a download about an idea for your business, you don't want to have to go through all of those entries and searching through. You label it so that you can go back and look just for those things. So think of how you want to structure your book, and all that's going to come to you as you go through. And even if you're doing electronic journaling, those things will be important that you label them as well. So you want to also, in certain dreams, when especially when there's a lot of feeling going on about your journal entry, you want to describe your mood and your emotions. Who was there with you? What place were you in? All of those can be very much keys to understanding more about why you're feeling what you're feeling. And so before you reread a journal entry, I recommend, especially if it's highly charged for you, is to give it a couple of days before you come back and revisit that entry, because that gives you some perspective, especially when it's highly charged emotionally for you. So one of the techniques, several techniques that I've learned about journaling over the years that have been very helpful, is that when you want to journal sometimes in first person, like I experienced this or I felt this, that, and the other, because then you're getting to the core of what it is that's about you. Yes, you can journal about other people, but this is about you and understanding yourself in relation to the other people. And so always start with yourself first, because then you'll get hung up potentially with blaming or making excuses for your reactions and responses because of what somebody else did. Trust me, that's going to come, but start with what you did, what you said, how you felt, okay? The other thing you can do, if something is really challenging for you to write about, it's something that was very traumatic, or something that you don't really understand why you're going through it, then you can write in the third person. She or he allows you to be the observer. It gives you some separation from the emotions of a situation so that you can be more open and in your interpretation of it. A great thing to do is to sit and do a meditation, do a visualization. One of the times that I really, really got the understanding of how powerful writing in third person was, I was trying to deal with some issues with my mom, very emotional. And so a such particular incident came up to me. And so I took the opportunity to close my eyes and just visualize that I was hovering up above the two of us, watching the interaction between my mother and myself and reliving the conversation. And it gave me a totally different perspective on what happened, and being able to see my mother in my spirit eye in that meditation, in that visualization, and see her body language as she was speaking to me, and the challenge that the two of us were having gave me a whole different understanding of her. It was very, very powerful. So from that time forward, I use that often as a way to go in deep in terms of understanding my reactions and my understanding with me, myself, and other people. So it's really a powerful thing to do so that you can get a better perspective. Another thing is that you can do in your journal is you can do what they call mapping or clustering, where you can't write a narrative, but you have a lot of feelings. You can put things in like, what's the central theme or idea of this? Maybe it was about, I got very angry and used some abusive language or something like that. And then you can just write the feelings that you had and write the reactions that were had in different bubbles around on the page. And that way you can come in from the side view of dealing with those different issues. And it'll give you an idea of how to approach it and not just hit it head on. You can also use what we call snippets in your journaling where there's so much information that either you don't have time to gather it or you don't want to forget it or something like that. So the snippet where you just write down the basics. So say I use a lot of snippets when I for my dreams, because sometimes I have these long, real active dreams and I'm afraid I might forget things. So I'll write down the main thing. I saw a red bird, I was in a blue car, or I was running or something like that. I'll write down how I felt. I felt very afraid or I was laughing. Just get those things. And what happens with the snippets in any situation is you capture enough that when you have time to come back and revisit that thing, those will trigger your memory of what it is that you want to go into deeper session with when you do the snippets. So automatic is another thing that comes up with journaling. And if you've never experienced automatic writing, that's fine. What happens is you start writing about one thing and then something else may come through your subconscious and you find yourself writing about that. And so it just happens automatically. It's not something you even think about. So some people experience that. So, one of the cautions about journaling I want to share is that journaling only about negative feelings and events can cause more stress and more trauma. It just causes you to revisit that thing. And I'm sure you've heard this, that the mind and your spirit doesn't know the difference whether that trauma is happening now or it happened in the past. So, make sure that you write about all different aspects of your life, not just the good stuff, not just the not so good stuff, but your whole life, because it's an opportunity for you to connect with you. My journaling has helped me to get to know myself, to rediscover and remember who I am and who I'm becoming and who I was, that I'm glad that I'm not that anymore. But also it helps me to just enjoyed meeting myself, if you will. So, those are some of the things I wanted to share with you about the joy of journaling. So, if you've never journaled, do yourself a favor and try it. If you have journaled and it has been a long time, revisit it for yourself. Another thing you can do with journaling is get a journal and get a nice pen and just have it there so that when you want to, you can chronicle some things about your life. And you can also journal, as we said earlier, just episode your life. When you're going through a challenge, go get a journal, you know, and write about that thing. And then if you want to, you toss it or burn it, but you can get a lot of benefit out of journaling for any phase of your life. Another thing about journaling is that if you have children of any age in your life, it's an amazing thing to teach children. And speaking of children, one of the things that I do in my journal sometimes is I'll have an experience, I don't have any words to put to it, or I may have a dream or a vision about something, and I'll draw what it is because it's much more effective than trying to write it out. So you can draw in your journals, as well as I've written poems or written words to wind up being a song that I sing to myself. So it's a beautiful experience. So with kids, you can start them at any age, even if they're not writing yet or reading yet. If your child has a lot of issues going on that they don't have the words for in life, then you can get them get a page, a book with no lines in it, or just get some construction paper or some typing paper with some markers or crayons and let them write or draw their feelings and you put words to it. I'm sure you've all experienced that yourself when children are young, somebody scribes for them to take in their feelings and their thoughts, and then you can add pictures to it. So you can do that with them to get them starting with the idea of connecting with their thoughts and their feelings. And it can be a joint activity that you do with them or something that you can coach them in doing and you're not looking at it. For children, once they get to the age where they can write, and where they can read, then you can help them know how to go about describing their feelings and then let them do it on their own. And it also is a way where you can build that trust that you're there to hear anything and everything when they want to talk about it, or after they express it on the paper, then they can come and share it with you if they choose to. So that privacy thing is really can be well reinforced with children at a very early age, so that if they wind up being journalers, or if you're a journaler, you can teach that I respect your privacy and you can come to me with it when you want, and understanding that you build a trust in the house that if somebody is a journaler, or if they all are, that's something that we respect and we don't violate people's privacy in this house. So at any age, you can begin that. And for teenagers, especially, a lot of times you have young children where they're close and they come and tell you everything. And then they get to what I call the twilight zone of the teenage years, and they don't want to talk as much, or they have a hard time expressing themselves. That's a perfect time to start journaling for them if you have not done that in the past. And in those cases, a lot of times they're going to want to do their electronics, use their electronic devices for their journaling. And I highly recommend that because everyone needs an outlet for their thoughts and their feelings. I read a saying one time that every emotion that we have is based on a need. And if the emotions are not so positive, it's an unmet need that's being expressed. And so when you think about it from that perspective, when we're journaling, it allows us to explore those unmet needs that we may have. And by exploring those unmet needs, it gives us opportunity to recognize, why is that need unmet? And it's all about being able to verbalize it for ourselves, to connect with it, and then be able to communicate it to the people in our lives. We take so much for granted that people can read our minds, or they ought to know better and that kind of thing, but they don't. And so, especially when you think of the people that you're closest to, that care about you and would never do anything to intentionally hurt you, the best thing we can do for ourselves and for each other is to explore those emotions that are difficult, that indicate an unmet need, so that we can know how to express those needs to ourselves, and then be able to communicate those needs to the people in our lives. And then we can be more prepared to meet people's needs, as well as more prepared to express our needs. And then we have a better chance of those needs being met for us emotionally. And so, with that, as we close, I hope this has been something helpful to you. If you've never tried journaling, hey, this is a perfect time. There's so much happening in the world around us, and we all have our different feelings about the different things that are going on. Why not give us a chance to explore and express some of those things through journaling? And then we can choose to handle things maybe in a different way. One of the experiences that I love, and I'm so glad that I've kept most of my journals over the years, is I love to go and pick a journal and open it up to any page and read in it. And what that does for me is it helps me to see how far I've come in some aspects of my life, things that I maybe have forgotten about that I experienced, and revisit how I'm doing in that aspect of my life. And then it also lets me see that there's some things that I really want to choose to hunker down and really work on. But it also is a way of recognizing how beautiful life is, and how we have the ups and downs in life, and the things that we thought we would never get over or be able to live through, how we made it through those things. So journaling is a great tool. And so I invite you to try it if you haven't, or if it's been a long time, enjoy your journaling. So thank you for listening to Aligned and Whole. Use your journal for spiritual growth so that you can continue to be in wholeness and in alignment. Until next time, take care.